you all for coming today. I'd like to announce that the largest seizure of fentanyl to date in the state of Michigan was made by our officers on March 28th. We seized approximately 41.5 kilograms of fentanyl, 2.5 kilograms of methamphetamine, and a kilo of cocaine, along with various weapons, pills, and money also. We seized approximately $150,000 in U.S. currency. This investigation started back in September with a single traffic stop by a Livonia officer on a subject, which resulted in an arrest for a minor violation of narcotics, and our officers worked this all the way up until the end of the case, which came on March 28th, which resulted in 3 search warrants, 1 in Clinton Township and 2 in the city of Detroit. And the evidence that you see behind me is what was seized through the efforts of our officers and those search warrants that were executed by the Livonia Police Department. As you see behind me, all these pills that are sitting here, there's approximately 100,000 pills that are sitting behind me that are fentanyl laced. And it is no doubt that without the efforts of our officers, that these lives that they are saving today was the result of their hard work. The seizure will save many lives, and I'm extremely proud of our officers and their commitment to fighting the drug trafficking that's here in Michigan and throughout the region. And it was all due to their hard work and our officers through their investigations. The subject that was arrested was arraigned yesterday downtown in the federal court. He is being prosecuted federally for controlled substances and distribution charges, and he will have a detention hearing on Thursday. That's pretty much it on our end. If you guys have any questions, comments.
The age of Mr. Willis?
He's 55 years old.
And residence? Is he a Detroit resident, Livonia
No,
resident?
he was a resident of Clinton Township.
So, I'm curious, can you elaborate at all? I thought, and this is my trying to backfill here, and I apologize. We had heard, or I thought I read that maybe there was a tip that came to you, but you mentioned traffic stop. Can you provide a little more in the sequence of how a traffic stop, was it of him or someone else, and then a tip comes from that? Or
no, typically when you guys mention tips, it's not somebody calling in. This is a total result of a police officer making a traffic stop, doing an investigation, which led to an arrest for narcotics that had nothing to do with Mr. Willis being stopped. And then we follow through with those arrests. Our officers continue to investigate where the drugs have come from. And in this particular instance, they were able to work their way up the ladder all the way to Mr. Willis.
So was the person arrested in possession of any fentanyl or drugs, or a court case coming?
It was some type of narcotic. I couldn't tell you what kind it was, but they were obviously arrested by us. And then from that, the investigators continued their hard work and worked their way up the chain.
The vast majority of what's behind you was found in the defendant's home, the resident?
The 3 locations we raided, yes, there was 3 locations. The defendant's home in Chesterfield, there was another house in Detroit off of Littlefield, and then there was a gas station off of Livonia. Yep.
Could you maybe explain the effects of fentanyl, what type of drug it is?
I'm not really sure how it operates, but I know that it's a suppressant for the body, and as you guys know, the amount of fentanyl deaths and overdoses in Michigan have skyrocketed over the years. If you look back to the epidemic when crack cocaine first started back in the 80s, how it took off, and then you had ecstasy after that. And this is by far the overreaching drug of choice right now for people, and it's so dangerous. One pill, and somebody not knowing that it's laced with this can be devastating, obviously. We estimate that with this, if all this had been turned into pills like you see behind me, there would have been over 160,000 pills that would be hitting the streets. So,
And street value?
approximately $4.5 million.
Once again, how did the traffic stop lead you to this?
Typically, and I can't say with this particular one, but a traffic stop happens because of a traffic violation, and then the officer discovers other things that are in the car. The person may have a warrant for their arrest, and you're impounding a vehicle, or you see narcotics in the vehicle, and it continues from there. But typically, most traffic stops are based on a traffic violation at first, and then when the officer goes up and starts to talk to the person or looks in the car, they realize something is criminally afoot and continue on from there.
To be clear, so we're accurate, were there some fentanyl pills or other drugs found in that vehicle on that initial traffic stop that traced back to Mr. Willis?
I don't have that answer, but I can say from experience that they probably wouldn't trace back to Mr. Willis. They would just be a narcotic that was confiscated on a traffic stop, and we would have no idea who sold that drug or produced it. So that part I couldn't tell you.
How does the jurisdictional stuff all parse out when you have different communities? Is this something where Livonia PD makes the initial stop and then realizes you might have something bigger here as this unfolds? And is DEA brought in early, or other jurisdictions, or how did you maybe work?
In this
collaboratively?
particular instance, this was all the work of our narcotics unit here in Livonia. Any crime that occurs in any jurisdiction, those jurisdictions follow up regardless of city borders. We have a large region in southeast Michigan, and we follow up with every case that comes into our city that affects our community, and we will follow that to the end. Sometimes they end early, sometimes they continue on, and we end up with the person that was actually supplying the narcotics that affects our citizens here in Livonia and obviously of southeast Michigan. As far as the DEA, in this particular incident, they've agreed to adopt the case and charge Mr. Willis federally. So in this particular one, they took the information that our officers have gleaned and are adopting that federally for federal prosecution.
Can you share when or how quickly you all realized this may be bigger than maybe initially thought, or give us any context of how this unfolds? Because the public or laypersons like myself might not realize how long this takes, if this was an unusually long time to go through a case like this, but when you realized you had something significant here.
It all depends on the case, quite frankly. You know, the level of dealer or narcotics user that you've stopped on the road, or the person that is arrested. Sometimes these cases, it happens in a week. This particular one was September to March, so you have to follow through and then do your investigation, figure out what you have, identify places, people, and locations where all of this stuff may be hidden and stored, because if you just decide that you're going to prosecute a case on one person, you miss out on the bigger picture, and that's what was a culmination today, was the bigger picture and what ultimately all law enforcement is seeking to do when it comes to protecting their communities and society. Is this is what we have to get to, is what's standing behind me, not necessarily the person that's addicted to these narcotics. And in this particular instance, our officers did a great job.
I got a question. What happens with the paraphernalia here?
Excuse me?
What happens with the evidence right here?
All this evidence is tagged, and then it's preserved until court time. It'll be tested and everything else that goes along with it.
$4.5 million street value. He's the only individual being charged, or is the case ongoing, or was he in operation with others? I mean, it seems, again, I have no basis, but it seems like a lot for one person.
I can say this, that you don't sell this quantity of narcotics without having other people. You can't be a sole source and do this alone. So, you know, the case is always ongoing, and it's up to the people that are prosecuting the defendant to maybe glean information or not. Sometimes we get that information, and other times we don't. But and with this was all from a single house, so to speak, and with that, you know, one person is not going to be able to produce all that at one time by themselves.
Can you talk more about the machines that are back there?
Um,
What are they used for? How they get them?
These two that you see on my right, those are pill presses. So what those are is they obviously transform all the powdered fentanyl into different pills. Different pill colors, different pill forms. And if you look up front here and you have your cameras from before, there's different colored powders up front. They use that to color the pills so that these pills resemble pharmaceuticals in the pharmaceutical industry that people may think that they're buying, such as a Xanax, something of that nature. So the pill looks just like a pharmaceutical Xanax, but when in actuality it's not. It's fentanyl. So they color code them for the consumer, the person who thinks they're buying a pharmaceutical grade pill to take, and it turns out it's not a pharmaceutical grade pill. It's fentanyl, and that's where we run into the trouble and they overdose.
So those machines typically are found in pharmacies?
Yeah, you're not allowed to possess those.
So
Those are illegal in and of themselves to have a pill press, yes. So where they come from, I have no idea at this point. Some of the other things you see obviously are tools of the trade. Pistols, money, Rolex watches, a money counter, you know, the things that we see all the time. So with that, if you guys have any other questions
I did,
for
if you
me?
don't- I did, if you don't mind. When I'm reading the court filing about Livonia Police Intelligence establishing surveillance of this individual, Mr. Willis, at the Savvy Sliders location on Livonia owned by his wife, later at a Citgo gas station, is it being alleged that he was using these operations to kind of transfer or house these drugs, or how did the commercial properties enter in, if at all?
Well, typically, if you're reading the court filing, it's based off of surveillance, and this is where a person was actually observed. It doesn't necessarily mean that that business is being used for narcotics trafficking. It just happens to be that that's where they were seen, and that was part of the affidavit that went into his prosecution for the arraignment on yesterday, for part of the information when they were working the case. But that's all that has to do with. It has nothing to do with the business itself.
Okay. So any other involvement potentially of his wife, or how they might have afforded to buy a franchise, et cetera?
That will be ongoing. That's completely ongoing.
You said Mr. Willis was 50.
55,
Do you know what his race is?
African-American male.
And you said Clinton Township resident, correct?
That's the residence that he was living at, yes.
And he plans on prosecuting that initial driver that was stopped at that stop, or, because I know you have Mr. Willis in custody right now.
Mhm.
Any charges on the driver that also was in possession?
That, I couldn't tell you. I don't know. That was back in September, so.
Gotcha.
And might you know what the federal charges are punishable by? I'm assuming they're felonies, but of this quantity?
I don't have the number of years that they're punishable by, but I can assure you that it's quite substantial.
Any idea how long this operation has been going on?
No. We just became aware in September.